You're not American. Who do you work for now?
I go where I'm set. Get his weapon out.
He looks for anyone who will turn him loose.
Don't ever point a weapon at me again.
Sicario.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kulturecast. I am your host, Chris Stachiw, and I'm joined by my two good friends all the way from the West Coast, though he would probably call it the best coast. He is the host of Richard Haddam's Paranormal Bookshelf, your friend and mine, Richard Haddam.
We're in a world of wolves now, Chris, and you're not a wolf.
I'm a wolf. Thank you. And also joining us from West Texas, your friend and mine, he's the professor of media and communications over there at Texas Tech, Dr. David Perlmutter.
Hello again to both of you. Thank you for letting me join you.
He gets to say doctor before his name. We don't. That means it's official.
I mean, unless we're talking to him, in which case we do say doctor before his name.
That's true. He requires it. Dr. Perlmutter. He's one of those guys. Everybody's got to know you're a doctor. All right. On this episode of the Kulturecast, I guess we're continuing or going back a little bit because we just talked about Hell or High Water. So we're going back to the first Taylor Sheridan film of the American Frontier trilogy. Richard, you didn't need to see the first one. This is the first one. Technically, we saw the second one, which is Hell or High Water. The film we're going to be talking about on this episode is not that film. The film we're going to be talking about is Sicario. So Sicario is directed by Denis Villeneuve, written by Taylor Sheridan, and it stars Emily Blunt, Benicio del Toro, Josh Brolin, and several other people. But, Daniel Kaluuya is there for a minute. John Bernthal is there because this was before the MCU found something for him to do. And it is all about Emily Blunt's character, an FBI agent who is brought in on a special ops mission to bait out a Mexican drug lord in the hopes of reunifying the drug trade in Mexico under one banner so that the United States can better control it. Am I right? I think so. That's kind of what I think. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So, yeah. So, David, I'm very curious. I'm going to give you the floor first. Why Sicario, and what did you think of the film?
Well, I have a couple of reasons. First, Taylor Sheridan has definitely become an institution, probably the most famous living auteur, Yellowstone, Landsman, bunch of other series. He bought the 666 to 46's ranch, which is not far from here. So he's certainly extremely famous in West Texas. But I think nationally, as somebody who really respects screenwriting, and I know great screenwriters, I'm so honored to know great screenwriters, Richard Haddam, you don't have a lot of people from the screenwriting ranks who become a global icon. And he has achieved, I guess, everybody's dream in the world of film. So I just think in terms of his works, that this was his first, I don't know whether it was first written screenplay, probably not, but this was his first produced, I believe, screenplay. And so the empire of Taylor Sheridan began with this, what I consider to be an excellent movie, which is the second point, which is I think this is an extremely well-written movie. I want to hear, obviously, we never pre-discussed, so I'm going to find out live whether you think I'm completely wrong. But I do think for my students, this is very well written, incredible direction by Denis Villeneuve. The details, I'm always interested in the props. I want to talk about the props, like the guns and the trucks and the little details of the movie. So I just think it's one where you can appreciate. And then going back to what you started out, I guess I'll end up arguing a little bit contrarian about who's the star of the movie, who the movie really centers on, what the movie is about. And I think great movies, we can have discussions where we have disagreements on necessarily what the point or the plot of the movie is.
What about you, Richard?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
You've heard of a pregnant pause. Richard is giving us a multiple.
Yeah. I was trying to adjust so that the sound is better on you guys, but It doesn't matter. I can hear what you're saying, so we'll just skip this. Anyway, did you ask me a question?
Yes, I did. Same question to you, Richard, about Sicario.
Fantastic. Loved it. I totally absorbing, involving, the Southwest in terms of the Texas-Arizona border going into Mexico, not exactly my favorite aesthetic. Not like where I want to spend a lot of time in a movie or in real life.
Wow, Richard.
But you can't deny that, this kind of movie has an intrinsic I was going to use the word charm, but that's the wrong word. It draws you in because it's the kind of movie whose story is, we're going to bring you into a world that you're vaguely familiar with, but you don't really know. And we're going to show you the inside of that world. And that is typically a very powerful way to draw an audience into a story. And in this story, Emily Blunt's character is our way in. We are her as she gets somewhat hijacked into this new assignment. We go with her sort of undercover. It's not even undercover. It's sort of embedded in the secret operations of drug control on the border. It's not DEA. It's not even DOJ. I don't know what it is. It turns out to be CIA. And it's like, okay, early on, this is going to be a movie that sort of sells itself on the notion, we're going to show you how things really work. Can you handle the truth? And so we're asking that of ourselves, and of course, Emily Blunt's character is asking that of herself. And it's fun as an audience member to sort of compare yourself to her and kind of go, okay, well, now what would I do in this situation? Am I as naive as she is? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And so as an audience, we are placed in exactly the right position. I believe we are given all the information we need. I don't think the narrative messes with us that much or at all in terms of what's really going on. There's a couple of layers that get peeled back, but I believe they're peeled back at just the right moments. So that this is a movie where we are always leaning forward, feeling overwhelmingly involved in what's happening. It's never so confusing that we have to lean back and go, okay, I don't know what's happening or who the people are anymore. So I'm kind of disengaged until I've been given enough information that I can fully participate in the narrative again. I think we're in it. And I think that's good. No false mystery, just mystery. And up until the final moment where we're wondering for ourselves and for her, is she a wolf or is she not a wolf?
I agree, obviously, I think with both of you. Dr. Perlmutter, I think, is going to have an interesting question about who the main character of the movie is, and I want to get into that at some point. But I think in terms of it being an interesting movie of a time and a place, and this movie came out in 2015, so we're 11 years down the road from this movie. Is the climate in Juarez, Mexico, the way it was then now? Best I can tell, maybe not so much anymore. It's a little bit different than it used to be. So it's interesting because this is also kind of like a little bit of a time capsule of a movie. It's of a kind of a time and a place where this was the big push. I remember this. I'm sure we all do, of like the mid-teens of like the cartels, and their big deal, and we got to deal with them. I mean, at one point there was even like, can we deem them a terrorist group, like to handle them? And so, I enjoy the aspect of the movie that is clearly the like telling of a time and a place. The actors in the film are fantastic. I mean, Josh Brolin, Benicio del Toro. I mean, good Lord. I mean, Emily Blunt is great, but I think obviously Benicio del Toro and Josh Brolin obviously, don't want to say kind of steal the show. They totally steal the show. And, I think to your point, David, about Taylor Sheridan, like this is Taylor Sheridan's kind of first big thing, and it's a hell of a thing. I mean, it's a hell of a movie. It's a hell of a movie to write. It's a hell of a movie to give up to somebody else to direct, especially a director like Denis Villeneuve, who, I mean, talk about someone who in the last 10 years has really cut their teeth on a lot of things. And is, Richard, like we've talked about on our James Bond show, supposedly, allegedly, he's going to be the one directing the next James Bond movie. So, and I will tell you, the cinematography in Sicario is fantastic. And I think Villeneuve has an eye for cinematography in a way that a lot of directors don't. And I'm excited to see where he would take a franchise like James Bond, because this film is so beautifully shot and it is so well put together technically that I feel like his eye for direction is just, I like Denis Villeneuve as a director because he knows exactly what he wants, how to get it, and how to go about doing it in a way that both maintains the sense of this is a film, but also, like you've alluded to, Richard, feels like we're a little bit in the things that are going on a little bit more than other directors are able to do. Villeneuve is really about setting you in those moments with the characters. I mean, you see it a lot in those Dune movies. Enemy is the same way. Prisoners is the same way. It's all about coming into something very big in a very small, humanistic, personal way. And I mean, Sicario, I think, really lives up to that, because for me, the movie is really about Benicio del Toro's character. Ultimately, I feel like, and, I mean, obviously the titular Sicario, he is the titular Sicario, so there is that as well. But I just find it interesting as a movie because it's so of a time and of a place. And then there's a sequel, which is nowhere near as good. But there is a sequel. So I mean, this is one of those movies where every time I watch it, I'm like, yeah, I really enjoy this movie, and then I promptly forget about it, not for any specific reason. It's just there's a lot of other things to watch. It's a good movie, that's for sure, and it's definitely better than most of these kinds of movies tend to be. But there aren't a lot of these kinds of movies either. I mean, like you said, Richard, like West Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, that whole border area, those kinds of movies all take a very similar hue to them if they're not, period pieces. So this movie is no different. This is probably the best, most well done visually of those movies, but not surprising given the direction and, who's involved kind of at the highest level of it.
Just to pick up on something both of you brought up. So you're watching a movie and it's set in Wisconsin or Switzerland. You have a palette of colors. You have a wild variety of environments. I was born in Switzerland, and you can shoot a movie. They actually have parts of Switzerland which, the way the weather patterns work, you can grow palm trees, believe it or not. So like you can shoot any scene in Switzerland. Maybe you have to like bring in some props for a desert scene, but like in Europe, you can shoot a lot of different things. In the Southwest, yeah, if you just flew in for an hour into West Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, borderlands, northern Mexico, you would see some more limitations. I mean, there are mesas. I mean, a lot of the classic Westerns, right? There's cliffs, but there's, you watch an episode of Breaking Bad, you watch Hell or High Water, you watch this movie, you think there's limitations, but I think that sets up the difference between looking and seeing. And I'm going to find a way to mention Akira Kurosawa. One of Akira Kurosawa's great movies, Dersu Uzala, where it was a movie about a Russian mapping military group in Siberia, because Russia was still absorbing Siberia in 1910. And this local woodsman, hunter from a local tribe, takes them around and he keeps lecturing them. He says, you look, but you don't see, because he's been living his whole life in the terrain. And so he can see the smallest things and say, like, a deer passed by an hour ago, that somebody with a gun made a fire here or something like that. And I think that's one of the themes here, is that you can take a snapshot of the Southwest and you think you have seen something. You think you know what's going on, but you don't necessarily know what's going on. It's hidden. And I think that keeps coming up. I mean, that's certainly what Josh Brolin, and to some extent, the Alejandro character, Benicio Toro, lectures the Emily Blunt character is about. Like, you're not seeing what's really going on. And of course, we have to make a decision whether they're right. A, they're right, and B, whether their method of dealing what's going on is right. But that seems to be a persistent theme, is like, you think you see something, but you're not really seeing.
Well, that is correct. And that is definitely the device of the movie, is, again, peeling back layer after layer after layer until the point where we're literally going underground. What makes it powerful? I mean, again, I kind of go back to the to the structure of it and our way in. Everything is very clearly set out at the beginning. An incident occurs during an investigation. People are killed. We're there. We're in the middle of it. It's horrific. And we're very quickly brought into the reality of the cost in human lives of the drug trade across the border. And we know that Emily Blunt is dedicated to stopping this. And she's given the opportunity when she's brought into this new operation. They don't tell her a lot, but they do say, do you want to get at the guy who is responsible for this?
Right. I love the language, don't you? Do you want to get the guy who's really responsible for this?
Who's really responsible. And they're not lying. I mean, it is true. And so she's like, yes, with her, at that point, limited scope and view of how these operations are carried out. And they're like, great, in that case, you're in the right group. So come with us. And as David said, they even, Josh Brolin's character even says to her, look around, pay attention, be a sponge, learn. Okay. We're going to do things a little bit differently. And we're so in her point of view that we're asking all the same questions she's asking. And it's expressed through the screenplay structure, but it's also expressed visually. Her point of view, looking at people, wondering about who is, Benicio del Toro, who is Josh Brolin, who are these guys really? What agency do they really work for? And then the answers, or at least some answers, come to us when they should. I do enjoy this sort of movie and this sort of journey. And I'm excited to get into a discussion about who the main character actually is.
So who is the main character of the movie? Because in my approximation, it's Benicio del Toro. It's not Emily Blunt. I mean, Emily Blunt is... What Blunt reminds me of is the male character in Hellboy. There's a kind of character that's brought in from outside of the organization, and he shows up and he's like looking around, wide-eyed and bespectacled at, oh, there's Hellboy and there's Abe Sapien and there's forget her character, Selma Blair's character. Like, look at all this crazy stuff. And it's like, that's kind of what this reminds me of, because if it had just been Benicio del Toro's character, it probably would have been too hard to justify the vague, ambiguous nature of their allegiances without it seeming like these are just bad guys. Which, I mean, to be fair, I'm not sure that's not the wrong answer. I'm just saying I think I applaud Taylor Sheridan for taking it upon himself to tell a more conventional version of the story while still staying interesting, because this is a little bit of a conventional way of doing this, but I think it's executed rather well.
Yeah. And I think this is a screenwriting class by two experts, and I'm just a member of the audience with my popcorn. But I think, did Emily Blunt need to be there in a badly written version of this, an amateur version?
Right.
You would have had just the top guys, and they've got their special ops mission, and they're going after the bad guys. Hey, we heard from local, Arizona police, there's something going on. Okay, here's our mission. And you think about the Mission Impossible type of scenario, like the old TV show and some of the movies where, okay, we've got the explosives expert and we've got the radio expert and wiring, and let's go get the bad guys. And they do. That would have been a very easy screenplay. Emily Blunt didn't need to be in that screenplay, because in those screenplays, they rarely have like tagging along on the special ops team an amateur who's not necessarily already gone through 10 years of training to be there, right? That now they have a narrative device, like, in order for us to do something on American soil, we need this. But she really did, in a bad version of the screenplay, she didn't need to be there. And I'll let you both more qualified comment on this. But it works so well to see through her eyes. She is not a naif. Like, she is an actual police officer who's dealt with death, who's dealt with the drug trade, but she is represented as somebody who is, like, 4 or 5 times in this film, she's surprised and astonished. Like, well, actually, she's very surprised and astonished when somebody that she brings home tries to kill her. She actually says, yeah, the guy I brought home from the bar just tried to kill me. How do we write that up as a police report? I mean, this is very brave to portray her as making these potentially fatal mistakes. And I'd like to hear from you guys about how, well, I mean, maybe there are some decisions there that you don't agree with, but I thought it was brilliant to have her and not her be the dumb sidekick saying, well, gosh, I don't understand what's going on. Could you guys explain it to me? You know, the Dr. Watson, the Sherlock Holmes, that like most detectives have a sidekick who has to have everything explained for the audience. But she serves, she's the best observer within a film that I've seen in a film in a long time. And I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Okay, so I'll be the one to say, I'll be the guy, I'll be that guy to say structurally, I feel very, very secure in saying this is Emily Blunt's movie and she is the main character. In the same way that I shock my television classes when I insist that the main character of the X-Files structurally is Scully, not Mulder.
That's 100% true.
Because that's the person going on the journey, and she's the one going on the journey. So structurally, I would answer the question in that way. But the fun thing about this is it's not math, and questions like this force us to really look at what the movie is about and what I would call the story, not the plot. David pointed it out perfectly. For the plot, we don't need her, but for the story, we do. Because this isn't a movie just about a plot, a mission to infiltrate a drug cartel and get the leader. What the movie is really about is, do the ends justify the means to a certain extent, or what the fuck even are the ends? Like what are we doing here? And it's almost a journey of cynicism that reveals a deeper cynicism that reveals a deeper cynicism that reveals the ultimate cynical heart of what is going on in this battle. But for the story, we do need a character who is on the scale the most naive. And that is Emily Blunt, because that's also the audience. We have to presume the audience is coming in somewhat ignorant, suspecting there's probably more going on. There's corruption. We've all seen these movies. We've all read the books and seen stories. But now we need to fill in all the blanks along the way. In the middle is Josh Brolin. On the naive side, of course, is Emily Blunt. And then on the full dark side is Benicio del Toro, who is following a very personal mission. And we get that impression early on. We're just not exactly quite sure what it is. And there's moments where we're sort of like, oh, wait a second, is this a double cross? And which would have disappointed me because that would have spoken to plot rather than character. And I don't need a spy movie where everything is just, oh my God, it's a mole within a mole within a mole. This is really about how do we, as what we feel we are, which is moral human beings, approach big, big moral problems. And what's nice about it is, as time capsule-y and as current or modern or cutting edge as it feels now or ever felt, we're in the world of Dashiell Hammett. We're in the world of Red Harvest. We're in a world of sometimes law enforcement is about pitting one bad guy against another bad guy. Sometimes it's about maintaining an order in which we don't capture all the criminals, we keep certain ones in place so we know what the hell is going on. These are very old stories. And it's always fun to see them represented to us in extremely modern garb like this one is, but it speaks to very old stuff, which is, can you be ever completely moral? Can you ever have your hands completely clean? These are great questions. At the end, is Benicio del Toro a moral man? In his own mind, in the mind of the audience? That's in a way the main question, which I think is why he feels like a main character, because he's facing those questions as much as Emily Blunt is, but from another angle. So we leave the theater thinking about both of them, but we get our answer. We do get an answer. I mean, literally at the end of the movie, I'm watching those two characters in this standoff that they're having. And I'm just like, okay, then now is the moment we're going to find out. Is she a wolf? Is she not? And when I say that, what I'm really saying is, did this journey change her a lot, or completely.
Your comment about Dashiell Hammett, I'm sorry, Chris, you were going to say something.
No, go for it. Go.
I'm a great appreciator of Raymond Chandler and the original stories and books of Philip Marlowe, his detective, The Big Sleep, and so on. And I remember the famous quote of Ross MacDonald, another novelist, said about Raymond Chandler. He wrote like a slumming angel. And I actually thought of that when I was watching this film. This is one of those films like, man, you need to take a shower after watching this film. We're taking, talk about a walk on the dark side. Like, you're seeing things, and are we moral agents? Because I was thinking my morality is being tested here. I mean, we're going to skip ahead, and I hope we spend a little bit of time talking about the dinner scene, because I spend my social media time usually on Reddit, and I swear once a day somebody posts is the dinner scene in Sicario the most brutal moment in the history of film, or something like that, because it's people who, those reaction things on YouTube where people watch, Star Wars for the first time, and oh, you mean Darth Vader is Luke's father or something like that, and people react, or the Red Wedding. Well, people watch the dinner scene, and I watched the dinner scene, and I was sitting there going, no, they're not going to allow this to happen in the Hollywood film. There's going to be something like he takes the cartel leader outside and shoots him and leaves the family. I want to talk in detail about that scene, but I think it's emblematic of the slumming angel. Is like, we are taken to the heart of darkness, whatever metaphors you want to use here. And we are along for the ride, and we have to decide, like, wait a minute, do I approve of this? I'm approving of it right now. Things that if you asked me in my daily life, I would say, no, don't do that. And I just think that is such a wonderful experience to watch a movie where we're subjected to that.
I agree with you completely, David. I mean, and Richard as well. Like, I think it's interesting to have this movie kind of challenge you and your belief system on the way criminality is handled by this country. I mean, obviously, the border is still an issue in a lot of ways, but not in the way that it was in this movie. Like, in this movie, they're obviously playing this up a little bit, and they're making this to be this kind of, not that I'm saying it's not a big thing, but it's a bigger thing in the way that the narrative is kind of expressing it. And what I always find so interesting about this movie every time I watch it is the dinner scene and the way it's used to kind of juxtapose the rest of the violence in the movie, but also just this idea of, like you both have said, like, we are unsure where the narrative is taking us more or less the entire time. I mean, it's going, we are along for the ride. It is not clear what is happening. The other characters know what is going on, if they know at all. Some of them know and some of them don't. And we are just passengers on a train here, and we have no control. And I'm not saying in a movie any one of us has any amount of control, but to have that control never given to you as an audience member is interesting, because that's not a common thing that is done when it comes to modern film writing. I mean, they don't want to challenge you in a lot of ways, because if you challenge an audience, the audience may kind of recoil in fear and not want to be, they just want to be given something. They don't want to have to try and achieve something. And not saying that broadly, I'm just saying I think that's the kind of a weird expectation that's being written down to now. And this movie doesn't do that. I mean, this movie leaves so much ambiguity out on the table, out kind of in the open. And like you have both said, it really challenges you as an audience member to ask yourself, where are you with everything, as much as Emily Blunt, because you may not even agree with the decision she makes by the end of it. You may come away with it going, well, I understood how she could get there, but I'm still not there. And I think a good, well-written movie challenges the audience in some capacity.
So we have a character of a police officer in Mexico, and we sort of visit him. We sort of step out of the narrative and visit him throughout the film, and we see bits of his life, his child who plays soccer on the weekends. The mom. We're given sort of the normal American family, except it's in Mexico. And then it's only toward the end of the movie that we catch up, and this person enters the main narrative, and the movie actually ends with sort of a brief coda about how all of this giant drama has affected this small family that was more or less outside the main action,
Right.
but is now collateral damage to it. And directly because of Benicio del Toro's actions. And in a way, what he does, and I'm going to talk openly because I'm going to have to assume it's been 10 years and so people have seen the movie. When he kills that police officer, that actually surprised me more than what he does at the dinner table scene.
Really?
Because I wasn't clear. I was sort of like, okay, so now does he consider this guy sort of like, you're almost, you're a part of this and I need you to get me to the next part of my plan, but I'm not going to make you necessarily pay for it because I don't need that to happen, even though this guy is implicit. And I was sort of like, I don't know, weirdly, because we've been given so much information about this guy's family, the movie is telling me to be on his side a little bit and to have a human concern for him. So when he is killed very quickly, almost offhandedly, I have an emotional reaction like, oh shit, that is much stronger than what I have at the dinner scene when the head of that particular cartel and his family are killed, which, again, narratively, I'm just looking at like, well, okay, this is of course what he's going to do. I'm not surprised.
Makes perfect sense.
Well, yeah, according to what we've been given and who this guy is, there's no question in my mind all ththese people are going to die. It's just a question of how much is he going to, inflict pain before the kill shot. And it's fairly quick and clean. What we are left with is that sense of collateral damage, that sense of outside of this main drama where we've seen lots and lots and lots of people whose everyday business is being on one side or the other of this drug pipeline. And then we just sort of see what you might think of as innocent victims, cop's dirty. Okay. But he's got a family, kid's not dirty, wife's not dirty, but they're victims too. And it's kind of cool that it sort of comes back, sort of steps back out of the main narrative at the very end to go, how is all of this whole war affecting just the man on the street now?
Right.
Now we know how it affected Emily Blunt's character, but how is it affecting the man on the street? Which I thought, ultimately was yet another way of approaching the question. And that's what's great about a movie that really is just about big questions. In this case, what's the difference between morality, justice, and legal procedure? And those all become three very separate things in this movie, pursued by different characters.
And what I love about each of those pursuits is they're both at times clearly defined in the narrative, but also rather muddy in terms of even where they are drawing their own lines of delineation of where the movie feels like it can come in at these things. Because each of the characters in the movie, at least the three main ones, Emily Blunt, Benicio del Toro, and Josh Brolin, who we barely even talked about Josh Brolin, who I think he's great in this movie, but he's given, of the three main characters, he's given the least to do of the three main characters because of the way the narrative uses his character to be. It's going to use the parlance that the movie uses. He's the spook. He's the CIA spook in the movie. And because he's the CIA spook, it's a very understated role. But at the same time, I love that he's just kind of, 3 steps ahead, but also he doesn't have his blindfold on the way she does intentionally. Like, he's the puppet master here, just kind of, because he knows what Benicio del Toro is going to do if Benicio del Toro is is confronted with anything outside of the ordinary. He's just going to kill him. Like, Benicio del Toro is single-minded in his goal, and it is so single-minded that legal proceeding and morality no longer matter. It is the metering out of justice that is all that is important. And it is, and like you said, Richard, the age-old story of an eye for an eye. Those people did not have to die, but they died because the collateral damage is part of the collateral damage is part of the punishment, because I think it's Jeffrey Donovan, who is, again, barely in this movie. He's great in Burn Notice. I think, what does he say when he sees those people hanging from the highway? He's like, it's beautiful the way they do it. It's a beautiful thing. And it's like, every time up until this recent time I watched the movie, I've kind of recoiled at that scene. But this time I'm like, I kind of get it. I understand what he's getting at. What they're doing is like, they're just, you scare the entire population shitless constantly and keep them in a total state of fear. And in keeping them in a total state of fear, you are able to do whatever you want, whenever you want, with essentially impunity, which is, which we see at the border crossing, which talk about a tense scene, but amazingly written, amazingly shot, so well acted. And I love the idea that it's not even made clear whether or not these guys are there to get that guy back. Those are just guys there with guns. That's what Emily Blunt says. She's like, what? Who are these people? Like, why are we even killing these people? And I don't know. It's like, okay. There's all of like one person, it would seem, that she has to kill. And it's the lone wolf cop on the bike. That's it. Everybody else seemingly didn't have to die.
Well, it's the unwritten line of Josh Brolin is to tell Emily Blunt, we're in the Wild West now. And it's funny because we're in the Southwest. This, you could compare this to a Western. Westerns are compelling and are typically compelling because they are stories of justice systems being built from the ground up. That's why, the good guys and the bad guys are all so compelling because we have not established the rules of the game yet in the West. That's what's happening here. It's different rules. Emily Blunt's rules are, we need to take these people to court and prosecute a case. And Josh Brolin is saying, that's not what we're doing here. We're playing a whole different game. And frankly, in a weird way, I was just going to say, it takes her a long time to get on board if she ever does.
Yeah, and in defense of her character, I'll go back a little. As you guys know, about 30 years ago, I wrote a book about police and the media that included doing a visual ethnography of a police department where I rode along in a squad car for a year and a half with officers and took pictures and saw what happened, asked questions about what happened, and then also compared it to sort of the TV portrayal of police, detective, crime. And one of the things that I learned right away was that police, even though in the television show Law and Order, they do show a connection between the law part and the order part. Police did have to think about things like getting a conviction in court, right? So sometimes I'd see somebody and I'd go, oh my gosh, that person is incredibly guilty. Why didn't you arrest them? And the police would say, we don't have enough evidence yet. We don't have probable cause. The prosecutor would blow up if we arrested now. They've got to make a case. The detectives need to do some things. And she lives in that world, right? She lives in the world of like procedure and like filling out a form. I remember one of the things that really struck me, in fact, in my book, I have a picture of the cubby holes where the 400 forms that you had to have. There's a lost bike. There's a form for a lost bike. There's a drug deal. There's a long series of forms for like discovery of drugs and, certifying the weight of the drugs and how much discovery of money in the world of forms. And obviously, anyone who lives in the world of forms fantasizes about, what if we had no forms for a day, right? What if we could just do what we wanted and solve the problem, right? So to some extent, Emily Blunt is taken to a drug enforcement officer fantasy camp where, and her character, the moral rectitude of her character is that she technically gives in at the end, but she fights it all the way. And I don't think she doesn't give in morally. She doesn't say like, okay, now I see, hey, Josh Brolin, hey, Alejandro, you know what? I'm going to transfer and join you guys. And in Sicario Part 2, I'll be... No, you never see her again. They're apparently going to make a Sicario Part 3. I'm not sure she's going to be in that one. We'll find out. But the point is that separation is one that we typically don't see, right? And absolutely a majority of people who work in law enforcement can't practice that. I mean, they'd literally be they'd be fired if they did. The local news station would find out. Their chief wouldn't allow it. I mean, so I think one of the beauties of the movie is it gives us this world of what could happen, what does happen. At one point, Josh Brolin actually says to her, this is what happens in Juarez when they get embedded, when they've dug in, right? This is what happens when they control they're the industry. And I think the Mexican police officer, the banality of his life. I mean, like don't we have like 2 minutes of like him eating lunch and talking about
breakfast,
soccer?
like rice and eggs.
Wait a minute, this is a film about like assassination and machine gun fights and whatever, and we're taking 2 or 3 minutes to this kid wants to go to soccer and his dad is tired from a long night. And well, I think it's showing the industry, like this is part of the world, and he's accepted it. He's not waking up in the morning going, gosh, I'm part of this terrible industry and people are being killed. He doesn't think he's going to be affected by it because it's so normalized.
Well, yeah. And, and then the guy, the Texas police officer who is corrupt.
Yeah, about John Bernthal's character.
Yeah.
It's weird to see him in something for like 5 minutes, given his like visibility now. It's very weird. I was like, right, he's in this movie for 5 minutes.
Well, it's funny. It's like one of the other things the movie is saying is that corruption is something you can only safely get away with if you're at the very top of the food chain. But corruption when you're down at the bottom of the food chain means you're going to get beaten up, killed, or sent to prison. That's what happens to him. That's what happens to our Mexican police officer, who are basically equivalent characters in a way. They're just like,
right.
We're just kind of like, bottom feeders that are facilitating all of this and maybe picking up a few scraps extra and a couple of bucks or something, but we're not benefiting in the way that others are. And they are the ones who pay the price.
Well, isn't that always the way the system works? The people at the top are insulated from all the bad things happening and the ones at the bottom aren't. I mean, and what's funny about Taylor Sheridan, Richard, I know you weren't with us for the Hell or High Water episode, but similar themes there. I mean, that's one of the themes in that movie is those at the top are insulated against the bad decision making of themselves or other people. And that insulation, allows them to throw other people under the bus or toss them to the wolves or however you want to perceive it. And that happens all the time. It happens everywhere in any capacity. The people at the top are often the ones exploiting those not in the same position. And Sicario, leans into that. What's funny is, like you said, Richard, the corruption's allowed when it's DOD guys or when it's, Benicio del Toro, who is apparently a former Medellin cartel member or is a Medellin cartel assassin. It's never made clear. They call him Medellin a bunch. And I'm assuming he is part of the cartel in a assassin capacity, but Benicio del Toro is definitely the less of him, the better in this movie. And the amount that they have of him in this movie works because I think it's the perfect amount. But that's one of these treading a fine line very carefully roles because it could have been way too much if they had just had like 2 more scenes, Frank. It's one of those things where I think like Taylor Sheridan hit the right amount of time that Benicio del Toro is in the movie without giving too much of what he's doing away.
I want to talk about how interesting it is we are having these conversations about small characters, which is another sign of a great movie, right? And I want to talk about my favorite small character because, as you both know, I have this idea. The Academy has never gotten back to me, even though I've emailed them many times, saying there needs to be an Academy Award for tiny performance, like just a few sentences or a look. I had to look really deeply to find out the cartel leader's wife, I believe. I actually have to say I believe instead of I know because I had to look like a lot for this. Laura Martinez Cunningham. Apparently she's not credited.
That's weird.
Yeah, she doesn't say a word.
Right. That's true. She doesn't. No, she does not. Yeah.
Screen Actors Guild or something like that. But let's just play this scene a little bit here. Okay, so Alejandro makes his way after some fancy shooting into the ridiculous palatial mansion of the, obviously ostentatiously over-decorated mansion of the cartel leader. He's already killed a bunch of guys, including the police officer, including the Northern Connection boss, north of the border boss. And first person he encounters after killing all the made guys, we would say in the mafia term, is a maid holding a salad bowl, as I recall, or like a bowl of food. And so this is where I'm thinking like, okay, well, and this is a term I think is used in the Sicario, Day of the Soldado film, like he's going to have to clean up, so that maid is going to die. But we don't see that. We don't know the 100% that he doesn't kill her on the way out. but he just looks at her, makes a judgment. You're no threat. You're not important, and walks past. So like we've gotten this little sign here. Okay, well, maybe he's not going to just shoot everybody in the room. Okay. And then he walks in, and I'll let you guys describe the dialogue and everything, but I want to talk about this. I hope her name is correct. I'm sorry, Laura, if I'm miscasting you here, but Laura Martinez Cunningham, the wife of the cartel leader. Now, flash backwards to Kay Corleone. Michael, did you have anything to do with this? And the door closing, right? At the end of the Godfather, right? Now, Alejandro says, here you are sitting dinner. I'm not saying the exact quote. And every night you have people killed, you have families killed. And you see the wife, again, Academy Award for tiny performance. She's terrified by the prospect of like her children, but a man with a gun is sitting there, right? In front of her kids. You could just, you have feel some empathy, no matter what she's involved in or not. Like, wow, to be in that situation, a mother, right? Any parent. But then she looks at the cartel boss for a second. It's an amazing look. And you're wondering, like, does she not know? Because in 2016, you have to think that there are no Kay Corleone. There are no ones who are innocent of what goes on in crime families. I don't know what the story is there, but like she pulls it off. And again, this is this question about people living in the same place, living in the house, living in Juarez, living in El Paso, whatever, living in Albuquerque, and they see, but they don't necessarily know. And I think that's a very interesting play that they have yet once again with yet another character there, a very tiny character.
Those characters are really hard to cast because at a certain point in the process, you realize, oh, this is very important. Like these two kids and this woman are going to be in one of the biggest scenes of the movie, if not sort of the biggest scene. They don't have lines. How do you go about casting those roles? What do you ask an actor to do at the audition for that role? The kids, what do you do? Or do you simply look at what they've done in the past, meet with them, have a conversation, and go, well, I hope it reads, that's when a casting director really helps you. Because even I wonder, it's like, what does a casting director really do? But a casting director can really be like, no, I know this person, I know their work, they're going to deliver. When they're on set, you'll be happy. And if you're a smart director and you've chosen the correct casting director, you listen to that.
I give a lot of credit, Richard. You did not join us for the Sopranos podcast that Mike White and I have the projection booth and I are doing, but Georgiana Walken, Chris Walken's wife, is one of the casting directors on that show. And her casting on that show is one of the main reasons that show works so well, is because everybody in that show is well cast. And I think to your point, like a good casting director can straight up break your movie,
or make your movie. Right.
I mean, look at, I know you're friends with Alan Ritchson. Look at the role he took over from someone who did not embody that role correct. I mean, the role of Reacher is not one that should be played by a diminutive human being. That is not the point.
Well, yeah, but when they're the biggest movie star in the world.
Yeah, sure. The biggest movie star in the world who has to stand on a box next to him. It's fine. He's not punching his neighbor off of his motorcycle or whatever the fuck he was doing over there in wacky Tennessee. It's in this film, if you don't have the right casting at every moment, there is going to be light that shines through the facade, because that's the other thing about this movie. And I think to your point, David, it's so well crafted and so expertly kind of honed in every direction that every role does have to matter. Even the kind of, I would say, the Mexican cop who is given like 5 lines in this entire movie, even he is sympathetic in a way that needs to be somewhat internalized by the audience. Because like you said, Richard, his death is as impactful as anyone else's is in the movie. And he is literally a nameless, faceless cop. That's it.
Yeah. Well, what's funny is that the final bad guy at that dinner table, the cartel leader, they actually cast a guy who, when you look at him, they could have gotten, Danny Trejo. Okay. A guy, you look at Danny Trejo and you're like, we're in trouble. this guy's bad news. And of course, the joke is Danny Trejo's one of the nicest guys in the world. And if you ever just see him in an interview, it's like, oh, I want to go party with this guy. But they cast someone who actually has a very engaging face, who does not frighten you, who, if you were sitting in a room with him, you'd feel totally at ease. And I thought that was brilliant. You know, it's like, okay, well, we know, we've been told what this guy is. We're not questioning it, but our instincts, when we look at him, we are slightly disarmed.
Well, it's the old, like, the devil comes to you in a suit, right? Not, with the horns and a tail. I mean, that's the,
right.
Yeah,
looks like a nice guy. He's probably, jokes around with his kids,
Yeah. Alec Baldwin says, good, you want to be good with your kids? Go home and play with your kids. You're a good dad? Okay. Doesn't matter if you're murdering people. I guess it's just, again, the morality of the movie is kind of the same thing that the Sopranos tackles in the third season, where it's like, at what point do the people involved know what they're doing and how it's affecting other people? And at what point, while they may not be doing it, quote, intentionally or not, at what point are they not essentially complicit in their actions or the actions of others that are being committed on their behalf? And it's you could ask the question of the cartel members or of the American government hiring Colombian assassins. Like that's the other thing that kind of just a lantern gets hung on. Benicio del Toro's character is a assassin for the Colombian cartel hired by the American government and assumingly paid American taxpayer dollars too. Which again, like it's like we've asked before, like ends justifying the means. I don't know if the ends justify the means in any of this, but I love watching a movie where they ask that question and kind of give multiple avenues to go down, because at times I would say the movie's wanting you to get to the point where the ends justify the means, and at other times the movie is challenging you to push back on it and say, no, the ends do not justify the means.
Well, a question that you can ask, and for fun, I'll ask you guys, is Emily Blunt at the toward the end of the movie, penultimate scene, has an opportunity to kill Benicio del Toro, and she makes a decision not to. Is killing him or not, which is the more moral act at that point? Killing him or not killing him?
Well, she makes a number of mistakes in this movie. One of them is, and I think it's a rule, you don't pull a gun and point it at anybody.
Right.
Unless you plan on killing him.
Unless one of your options that you might exercise, right? I mean, especially in that kind of a scene. And I think, I don't know if you interviewed Alejandro, the character, and asked him about Emily Blunt. I thought, again, this is just the amazing acting. And again, we could spend 2 hours on the sound design. I want to bring the sound design. It's
no kidding.
Like, yeah. Like, I was thinking of actually the most recent content beautiful content that I compared to was Chernobyl, where they had no music. It was just sort of siren-y, twists. But this, a lot of the sounds in this movie are wails. They're cries of pain as music, mixture there. Well, okay. So if I were interviewing Alejandro, tell me the truth. What did you think of this police officer from America? I think he actually respects her. I think he actually says, like, okay, I get where she's coming from. She hasn't experienced what I've experienced. She hasn't seen what I've seen. She's standing up for her principles, but business is business. We've got to achieve our ends by any means necessary. So it's not. I've seen some fan theories on the web of how, like, Emily Blunt is continually humiliated and the whole point of the film is to make fun of her. I think that's 4 or 5 bridges too far in terms of character there. That's a very
dismissive way of looking at the movie.
Yeah. I think they're all professionals, but in different worlds, right? And I think that's just something that really comes across there. And we don't know what's going to happen afterwards. Obviously, we do know because there was a Sicario Day of the Soldado, and Josh.
She's not in it. She's not in it. She's not in it at all, which is low key hilarious in and of itself.
I mean, it's implied that she didn't, immediately fly to Washington and talk to, the Washington Post or something like that. I mean, her story is ended. Maybe we'll see Sicario 3. But the point being that I like the respect there. And in the dinner scene, let's go back to the cartel boss. His kids, I'm trying to think. You're how old were they? 7 and 10 or something like that. That's a tough scene, right? Like you casting a child. And like a manic is coming in there, and like we don't want you to be. You grew up in a family where you're not going to show terror. You're not going to start crying and begging for your life. Nobody's begging. Even the wife doesn't say, "Oh, please don't kill my children." It's just not possible within the culture of somebody living in that situation. The kids don't. The kids are afraid, obviously, but they don't. They're not quaking in terror. That's great. The directing of young actors, that's great young acting. The cartel boss, I love his physicality. I love how he changes stance. The shifting his, like, at first he's like, women, please don't do this. And then, oh, you know what, buddy, let me tell you something, about the business or something like that. And he becomes 3 or 4, he switches roles 3 or 4 times. And you can see how effective a businessman he is. That when he has to be hard, he has to be hard. When he's probably negotiating with equals, he's negotiating with equals. Probably sometimes he's an encouraging boss. Hey, I really approve of what you did on Thursday. We're so glad to have you with the company. He could probably pull that off too. And again, it's this world of different professionalisms, and I just appreciate how much Villeneuve and Sheridan were able to, and the casting director and whoever, all the other people involved were able to pull that off.
I think the complaints about Emily Blunt's character are based on an expectation that she will be a traditional hero. She will reveal herself as the hero of the story, which I find, I can understand that, I guess, but for me, so early on, the movie was telling me this is not going to be a movie where traditional notions of heroism or, the triumph of law enforcement is going to be held up and celebrated. Early on, I felt like that wasn't going to be the story. I thought the story was going to be the slow cynicalization of Emily Blunt. And so for that to happen, all those humiliating moments are there to reveal over and over and over again to her, the world is not what you think it is. You still think it's this when it's that. So you're going to keep tripping. You're going to keep hitting, you keep running into that glass patio door until you get it. And she never gets it, which at the end, we're left to wonder, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
It reminds me a lot of Chinatown at the end, where it's just like, that's just the way it is. Like it just is. And they don't say, they don't have to say, it's Nogales, Emily Blunt. They don't have to say that. It's what is, it's what is, Kate Macer. Like, they don't have to say that, but by her not shooting Benicio del Toro, by him putting her on the spot, by him coming back to her apartment and, don't stand, you shouldn't be standing on any balconies for a while. Like, by him saying that, like, that is that moment of like, you need to understand that things have changed and you are still operating as if things are the same. And you refuse to accept that you are now a different cog in a different machine than you ever were before.
Yeah. And it's interesting that they send him, and I'm glad they did, because the story needs those two characters to come to a conclusion. But when you step back, you have to wonder how useful Benicio del Toro is to this operation anymore. He has achieved his ends. He no longer really has a stake in assisting the United States of America in their anti-drug efforts. How far away from a bullet in the head is he? If they had one more scene where he's having a beer with Josh Brolin and Josh Brolin blows his head off, you'd go, "Oh, right, of course."
Right, makes perfect sense.
We're done. We've shot that load. He's done now. He is no longer useful to us. He was only useful when he had an agenda. That agenda's been served. Moving on. Now he can only be a liability.
Sicario 2, Day of the Soldado. Have you seen that movie?
No.
Okay, well, obviously they stole some notes from you.
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah.
I'm not going to give away the plot, but Alejandro is back, and this issue comes up. Let's put
Interesting.
It that way. So we'll have to watch. Well, I've watched both of these films about 5 times, but I do recommend Day of the Soldado. I actually think maybe I'd love to have a show on it, but the point being that he does prove to be useful for other things.
Oh,
yeah. But to to both of your points, it is interesting because you would think in another movie they would have that scene. That would be the addendum scene is, he's going out to his car and turns it on and the car explodes. Like you said, David, got to clean up all the loose ends, got to make sure everything is done and there's nobody left to talk about it. And I love that scene at the end because it's an echo of a scene, 20 minutes earlier in the movie where Emily Blunt comes upon Benicio del Toro taking the cop hostage, and she points a gun at him. And she's like, you got to stop. I'm taking you under arrest. And Benicio del Toro just goes, bang, bang, shoots her in the chest, in her body, in her vest, and goes, don't ever point a gun at me again. And it's like, okay, we're gonna get the payoff here at the end of the movie of that. And in that moment, we now have seen the transformative nature of the narrative on her character. And it's funny because it's not really that far from the end of the movie where that happens, but it's just enough time. There's just enough of an achievement of the goal at that point that we understand, okay, well, she realizes that the ends did justify the means in some capacity. And I like that we never see that realization on screen ahead of time. It's in that moment that we see it, which again is a director, a writer, and a cinematographer trusting the audience to understand what they're conveying through the magic of the filmic language, which is not just audio, but visual and dialogue. And I again, the end scene of this movie, I think, is as impactful as any other scene because, again, it shows the nature to which we are willing to turn a blind eye to getting things done, even if the ends do not justify the means. Because by the end of the movie, she is a changed character. Her idealism has been washed away in some respects by the reality of the nihilistic nature of pitting two warring cartels against one another is pretty nihilistic. It's a race to the bottom. But once you figure out which rat is the most dangerous rat of all, then you drown that rat in the bucket too. And there you go, everybody. And that's the U.S. apparently. I mean, that's the take here, right? I mean, that's the take on the U.S. government is the U.S. government is drowning all the rats in a bucket until there's one big rat left, and then we try to drown that rat too. It's all about survival of the fittest, and the cynicism behind it, I think, comes back to the Taylor Sheridan of it all, because Hell or High Water is a movie that I think is immensely cynical, but also by the end of it, it's very hopeful. This movie is reversed. Very hopeful at the beginning, immensely cynical at the end. Like, there's nothing uplifting about the end of this movie. You have children playing soccer with gunshots going off in the background. Like, that is not a optimistic movie. That is and it's just Chinatown, Jake, of it all, because life continues with or without, regardless of what's happening, life continues and the cartels are still there.
Yeah. And typically, and again, I imagine being a student in Richard's screenwriting course here, typically a criticism of a film would be, it had 6 endings. You got to have one ending, right? That would be a pretty good appreciation of a student saying, like, you keep having another ending, but this film had points where a normal film, a lesser film, could have just ended. Like, okay, Alejandro kills the cartel boss and his family. Credits. That could have been an ending, right? It could have been. There were 3 or 4 points, and then the coda of like, okay, Emily Blunt, you got to sign this document. Either your brains or your signature are going to be. I mean, I have to think that's a direct reference to The Godfather. There, either your brains or your signature is going to be on this paper. But then there's another ending. But they all work. And again, typically in a film, it's a negative criticism to say, yeah, that film had 4 endings. They should have made up their mind which one. I think all of those endings needed to be there. Again, you're the screenwriting teacher, Richard. You tell me, and you're the producer, Chris. You tell me.
Well, I agree. Excuse me. I agree. The ending on the family of the corrupt Mexican cop was somewhat required by the math of the screenplay.
Right. It was off by -1 right at the end. It needed that little...
Yeah, the remainder 1. You had to readdress it because it was the one line of narrative that stood outside kind of the main thrust of everything else in the story. It was sort of this alternate parallel story that did need to be concluded, as it were, even though it's not really concluded, but it is capped off. It is referenced. And again, what's interesting is then you can have the argument in class. You can have the discussion. You can have the assignment, which is what was the meaning of that storyline? What happens if we remove that storyline? Could that storyline have been removed from the movie? I think it could have. It's like removing a particular instrument from a band or an orchestra. But what does it add? The question becomes, what does it add? You could Jenga those scenes out. If the studio put a gun to your head and said, you have to cut 10 minutes. Yeah, you could cut that and you would still get the overwhelming gist of the movie, both plot-wise and story-wise. But to add that little bit of harmony in allows for an even greater picture, because this is a movie that wanted to approach this issue from as many different points of view as possible and show it from a variety of angles. And that's what that storyline allows for. And that's why that ending doesn't bug us. Do we need Josh Brolin? Probably not. Do we need to see what he's up to? We know what he's up to. We thought he was going to be the height of cynicism at the beginning of the movie. Turns out he's not. Turns out he's just kind of a cog in a machine. So we don't really, do we need to go back to Daniel, her partner? No, we get it. We sort of know, we heard the part he's saying in this choir. We're good. So yeah, it's fun. This is a great movie to discuss and talk about, because it's got that perfect mixture of feeling extremely modern, and yet all of its themes go back to the Greeks.
It's Taylor Sheridan, man. He's painting with a rather broad brush, but the colors that he's using, I feel, are not distinctive, but they have not been painted in a while. And Richard, you know this as well as David, like the Western has fallen out of favor, sort of, but to David's point, Yellowstone, Landsman, all these things, those are just Westerns, or as I think, David, you put it last time, what Taylor Sheridan has kind of hewed the Western towards for a while. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, if this is the way that the Western can survive as a genre, I'm all for it, because just to have dudes in cowboy hats running around on horses, there is a moment where that's going to hit a kind of zenith point for people. And the fact that we can kind of get whatever this is on the other side of it, this kind of, you call it a neo-Western or a noir Western or whatever you want to call it. Like you said, Richard, this is ultimately just a Western.
Well, for my money, the last Western was Unforgiven. And that was it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We talked last time about these points where a Western comes along for generationally. The Wild Bunch, I remember seeing it and being told this was the Western that ended the Western, in the sense that, like, the last scene is the precursor of World War I, the machine gun. The industry has destroyed the man against the man, the high noon, the personal duels, going back to the Odyssey and the Iliad, where battles are settled by personal duels between heroes, right? And of course, that just up through the Westerns of John Ford, all of it. But then along comes, in Sam Peckinpah's The Wild Bunch, a machine gun that'll take out 500 people, which it's set just a couple of years before World War I, where we discovered that, on a level battlefield against heavy weaponry, your heroism really doesn't mean much anymore. And I think that is something that this film is asking here, is not just a question of like, is anybody a hero here? Because, like, going back to the ancient Greeks, of course, heroes were people who were literally like Achilles, half man, half god. Like their lineage, their parentage was half a man, half a god. And you weren't, if you were an ordinary mortal, you couldn't be a hero. Like genetically, they wouldn't allow you to be a hero. We've imposed the idea of someone being a hero who doesn't have that heritage. Tom Cruise obviously is a hero in every film there's in this film. People do things which, again, I sat there, the dinner scene, a whole bunch of scenes, and it went in a direction I didn't expect, which is the greatest respect I have for a movie is when it goes, or a television show or digital game, when it goes in a direction I don't expect, but I go, oh boy, that's better than anything I came up with.
Nice. Yeah,
I'm with you. This, I think we've all said, like, this could have been, and in the hands of a much lesser director and screenwriter and cinematographer, this would have been a very straightforward, by the books, we know where this is going, we know where this is headed kind of movie. And it is so far from that. And I think to Taylor Sheridan's credit and to Denis Villeneuve's credit, this is a movie that I think, clearly there's been one sequel. There may be another sequel. It's, I think, one of Denis Villeneuve's better movies, even though he's made a whole lot of really great movies as well. So there's a lot of really great things that go into this movie, not to just mention the acting and everything else. So, I mean, Taylor Sheridan, it's not a surprise that he's been as successful as he has, but I wouldn't have thought, like, let's translate this into a TV show. Let's translate this tone into a TV show. But man, works like gangbusters. So good for him.
TV has changed, hasn't it? I mean, yeah. I'm old enough to remember where, oh my God, you'd watch a CBS drama and you knew that they weren't going to kill a child on screen, right? Or implied on screen, unless it was just the worst villain in the world. We live in the streaming world, right? You can do a lot, but this does have so many elements that, in fact, we're going to see now, because it's interesting that Taylor Sheridan has signed a deal with CBS, right? He's going to be producing. Marshall's is
right. Good for him. Like this, if this is what people are resonating with, awesome. Like, far be it from me to argue. Like this genre of filmmaking and television, like, has not really been a thing for a while. So, I'm not gonna poo-poo it. So, anything else we want to say about Sicario before we close this episode out? No? Richard, no? David, no? Okay. Well, until the next time I or Richard or David come and talk about movies, you can find me over at the Kulturecast, but more importantly, Richard, where can people find you and the things that you work on?
People can find me on the award-winning Richard Haddam's Paranormal Bookshelf podcast. Check it out on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
I don't think the last time you were on here you said award-winning. What award is that, Richard?
The Signal Award.
Hell
I got a bronze. 3rd place, motherfucker. Oh, wait. I'm sorry. Once again, students. I'm sorry.
I have a bleep. I'm going to have a bleep button on this. A bleep, bleep, bleep.
To be fair, there were only 2 times I said the word fuck.
Wait
a second. That's 3.
Make that 3. Oh Lord, man, we're gonna have to button here on this one. Speaking of buttons, go ahead and hit the subscribe or like button, or wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes or Spotify, more than likely. Like, rate, and review this show there. Patreon.com/Kulturecast is where you can go to kick a couple dollars my way. You get to hear Richard and I and Mike White talk about James Bond. That is coming to an end very quickly. We do not know what we are doing next, but it will probably be just as entertaining as the Bond podcast. Dr. Perlmutter, thank you so much for picking the film and requesting Richard's appearance at the party.
Oh, thanks, man.
He shows up when asked, only nicely. And as always, we'll catch you on the next episode.